The gun went off before Cynthia Okafor could scream. She didn't have time to think, didn't have time to process what her body was doing as she launched herself forward, shoving the elegant Korean woman out of the bullet's path. Pain exploded through her ribs. The world spun. She hit concrete hard, tasted blood, and the last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her whole was a man's face, beautiful and terrible, his eyes wide with something that looked like recognition, like he'd been waiting his entire life to find her, and now that he had, he'd burn the world down before he let her go. Welcome to Black and Soul TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Cynthia woke up drowning in silk. Her first thought was that she'd died and somehow ended up in the wrong afterlife. The ceiling above her wasn't the water-stained drywall of her cramped studio apartment in Itaewon. It was pristine white crown molding, the kind she'd only seen in Korean dramas about rich families. Her fingers touched sheets that felt like they cost more than 6 months of her teaching salary. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Seoul's skyline glittering like scattered diamonds, and for one confused moment, she thought maybe this was heaven. Then the pain in her side reminded her she was very much alive. "You're awake." The voice came from her left, smooth and controlled, speaking English with barely a trace of accent. Cynthia turned her head too fast and immediately regretted it. The man sitting beside her bed made her breath catch despite the pain. He was devastating in the way that dangerous things often were. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. He wore a 3-piece suit like armor, every line perfect, every detail calculated. This was a man who commanded rooms without speaking, who made grown men nervous with a glance. "Where am I?" Cynthia managed, her throat dry. "What happened?" "You took a bullet meant for my mother." His jaw tightened slightly. "The shooters fled. You collapsed. My people brought you here for treatment. You've been unconscious for 20 hours. Memory crashed back. The late-night walk home from her tutoring job. The alley shortcut she took 3 times a week. The elegant older woman being cornered by 2 men with guns. Cynthia's body moving before her brain caught up, fueled by instinct and her father's voice in her head, always telling her to stand up for what's right no matter the cost. "I need to leave," Cynthia said, trying to sit up. Her students would be wondering where she was. Her roommate would be worried. Her phone was probably dead, and she had lesson plans to finish and rent was due in 4 days, and she couldn't afford to miss work. She made it exactly 3 inches before her ribs screamed in protest. The man didn't move to help her. He just watched with those unreadable eyes as she struggled, as she realized she was wearing someone else's clothes, expensive pajamas that fit her perfectly, which meant someone had undressed her, measured her, dressed her again while she was unconscious. The violation of it made her stomach turn. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What is this place?" "My name is Kang Jihoon. The woman you saved is my mother. This is my home. And you, Miss Okafor, just became the most interesting problem I've had in years." That should have sounded threatening. Instead, it sounded like a promise. The next morning, Cynthia woke alone in the massive bedroom, sunlight streaming through windows she couldn't figure out how to cover. Her side still ached, but the sharp pain had dulled to something manageable. She found clothes laid out on a chair by the bed. Designer labels she recognized from magazine spreads. A cream silk blouse and tailored black pants that looked like they'd been made specifically for her curves. She refused to put them on at first, clinging to her borrowed pajamas like they were armor against whatever this situation was becoming. Then a woman appeared, slight and efficient, introducing herself as Min Ji, the head of household staff. "Mr. Kang requests your presence for breakfast," Min Ji said in Korean, her tone perfectly polite and completely inflexible. "He asked me to help you dress if your injury makes it difficult." Cynthia's Korean was fluent after 3 years teaching English in Seoul, fluent enough to catch the subtext. This wasn't a request. It was an expectation. She dressed herself, refusing help, gritting her teeth through the pain. The blouse fit like it had been tailored to her body, which it probably had been. The realization made her skin crawl. How long had they been watching her before that night in the alley? How much of what happened had actually been coincidence? Jihoon was waiting in a dining room that could seat 30 but was set for 2. He stood when she entered, a gesture of politeness that felt jarringly normal given the circumstances. He'd traded last night's suit for something more casual, dark jeans, and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of less. "You look better," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. How's the pain? Manageable. Cynthia remained standing. I appreciate the medical care, but I need to go home now. I have responsibilities. Work. Students who depend on me. Sit down, Miss Okafor. We need to talk. It wasn't a command exactly, but the way he said it made clear that refusing would be pointless. Cynthia sat, mostly because her ribs were protesting, and standing felt like proving a point that would only hurt her. A woman appeared with food, Korean breakfast dishes mixed with jollof rice and plantains that made Cynthia's heart stop. Someone had researched her background thoroughly enough to know she was Nigerian. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it was terrifying. I know who you are, Jihoon continued once they were alone again. Cynthia Okafor, 26 years old, English teacher at Seoul Foreign Language Academy. You've been in Korea for 3 years on a teaching visa. You send money back to your family in Lagos every month. Your father is Chief Okafor, renowned lawyer in Seoul, currently building a case against organized crime networks with international connections. The ice water that flooded Cynthia's veins had nothing to do with the air conditioning. How do you know that? I make it my business to know about people who interest me. And you, Miss Okafor, interest me very much. Later that afternoon, after hours of useless argument, Cynthia finally understood the shape of the trap she'd stumbled into. Jihoon's mother, the woman she'd saved, was Kang Jihoon, matriarch of one of Seoul's most powerful families. On the surface, they ran legitimate businesses, construction and shipping and real estate. Underneath, they controlled half the city's underground economy, protection services and high-stakes gambling and import networks that official channels couldn't or wouldn't touch. The men who'd attacked Soyeon weren't random criminals. They were professionals, hired by a rival organization to send a message. By interfering, by saving Soyeon's life, Cynthia had painted a target on her own back. These people don't leave witnesses, Jihoon explained, his voice matter of fact. The moment you stepped between my mother and that bullet, you became their problem. They'll come for you. And when they do, they'll make it painful to punish me for their failure. So let me go? Cynthia's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs. I'll disappear. I'm good at staying invisible. You can't disappear from people with the resources they have. They have contacts in every police station, every hospital, every foreigner registration office in this city. You run, they find you. Then they make an example of you to hurt my family. Unless you stay under my protection. Here, where they can't reach you without declaring open war. The door opened before Cynthia could argue further. The man who entered made the suited guards positioned outside look like children playing dress-up. He was massive, easily 6'4", with the kind of build that came from actual combat rather than gym vanity. His face was striking in a way that demanded attention, sharp features and dark eyes that assessed Cynthia like she was a problem requiring immediate solution. This is Miho, Jihoon said, my head of security. He'll be coordinating your protection detail. I don't need a protection detail. I need to go home and pretend this nightmare never happened. Miho's expression didn't change. With respect, Miss Okafor, you took a bullet for Mrs. Kang. In our world, that creates a debt. More importantly, it creates a bond. The people who tried to kill her now see you as leverage against this family. Your life as you knew it ended the moment you interfered. This is your reality now. The casual way he spoke about her life ending made Cynthia want to scream. She was a teacher. She graded homework and helped students with pronunciation and lived a quiet, invisible existence that hurt no one. Now she was sitting in a mansion being told her existence was forfeit because she'd done the right thing. What happens if I refuse all of this? She asked quietly. If I just walk out that door right now? You'd make it about 3 blocks before someone picked you up, Jihoon said. Best case scenario, it's one of my teams, and they bring you back here safely. Worst case, it's the Jade Serpents, and you disappear into a torture room until they've extracted every piece of information about my family they think you might have. Then they kill you slowly to send me a message. His voice never rose. He delivered the horrible truth, like he was discussing weather patterns. Cynthia felt the trap close around her with elegant simplicity. By the end of that first week, Cynthia had been measured for an entire wardrobe, assigned a security detail that followed her everywhere, including to the bathroom where they waited outside, and given access to parts of the mansion that made her understand exactly how deep into darkness she'd fallen. The basement wasn't elegant like the floors above. It was concrete and fluorescent lighting and the smell of gun oil and something metallic she didn't want to identify. Men in tactical gear moved through the space with military precision, monitoring feeds from hundreds of cameras positioned across Seoul. "This is Command Central," Miho explained during her first tour. 24/7 surveillance of our territories. We track rival gang movements, police activity, shipment schedules, everything that keeps this operation running." Cynthia stared at the monitors, dozens of camera feeds showing warehouses and street corners, and the interiors of businesses that looked legitimate but clearly weren't. "How many people work for him?" she asked quietly. "Directly? Maybe 300. Indirectly, thousands. Most don't even know they're part of the network. They just know someone pays them better than anyone else and doesn't ask uncomfortable questions." The scale of it stole her breath. This wasn't some small-time operation. This was an empire built on violence and fear, disguised as legitimate business. And she was now trapped inside it. That evening, Jihoon summoned her to his private office on the 3rd floor. She'd never been in his personal space before. It was surprisingly sparse, minimal furniture and lots of windows, shelves lined with books on strategy and philosophy. A photograph on the desk showed a younger Jihoon with an older man who had the same intense eyes, the same commanding presence. His father, Cynthia guessed. The man whose empire Jihoon had inherited. "You've been avoiding me," Jihoon said without preamble. "I've been processing the fact that my life was stolen from me." "There's a difference. Your life wasn't stolen. It was complicated. By circumstances beyond your control, yes, but also by your own choice. You chose to save my mother. Everything that followed is consequence, not theft." Cynthia wanted to argue, but found she couldn't. He was right in the most infuriating way. She had chosen to act. She'd known the risks of interfering in violence, had made the calculation in a split second, and decided saving a stranger's life was worth potential danger to her own. She just hadn't understood how complete that danger would be. "Why are you keeping me here?" she asked. "Really, if I'm such a liability, why not just eliminate the problem? You could make me disappear, and no one would know. Your family in Lagos would know," Jihoon said quietly. "Your father especially. Chief Okafor has been building his case against Korean organized crime for 2 years. If his daughter suddenly vanished in Seoul, he'd burn this city to the ground looking for answers. I prefer not to make enemies of men that dangerous. So I'm insurance. Leverage in case my father gets too close to exposing you." Jihoon smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You're a complication I'm trying to resolve without anyone dying. Be grateful I'm approaching this with patience instead of efficiency." The following morning, Cynthia woke to find Soyeon herself waiting in her room. The older woman sat in an elegant chair by the window, perfectly composed in a lavender hanbok that probably cost more than Cynthia's yearly salary. Up close, Cynthia could see Xian was probably in her late 60s, silver hair pulled into an intricate knot, the kind of bone structure that spoke of old family lines and older money. "Good morning, child," Soyeon said in English that was barely accented. "I thought it was time we spoke properly. You've been here a week, and I've been terribly rude not welcoming you personally. You've been recovering from being shot," Cynthia said carefully. "I understand the delay." Soyeon's smile was warm, but her eyes remained calculating. "I'm recovered now, and I wanted to thank you properly for saving my life. You didn't hesitate. You didn't calculate the risk. You just acted. That kind of courage is rare and precious. I'm not courageous. I was stupid, reacting on instinct without thinking about consequences. Courage and stupidity often look identical in the moment. It's the aftermath that reveals which is which." Soyeon stood with fluid grace. "You're angry about being kept here. I understand. But I want you to consider something. What kind of life were you living before that night?" Cynthia wanted to say her life had been fine, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. She'd been barely surviving, teaching English for wages that didn't cover rent and food, sending money home to her family, while slowly drowning in the impossible economics of existing as a foreigner in Seoul. She'd been invisible and exhausted and one emergency away from complete disaster. "Here," Soyeon continued, reading Cynthia's silence accurately, "you have safety, comfort. Your debts will disappear. Your family in Lagos will receive security they don't even know they need. All I ask in return is that you give my son a chance." "A chance to what?" Cynthia asked warily. "To prove that this world isn't what you think it is. That we're not monsters. We're survivors who learned to thrive in shadows because the light was never meant for people like us." Before Cynthia could respond, Jihoon appeared in the doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, but Cynthia was learning to read the subtle tension in his jaw, the way his eyes tracked to his mother first before landing on her. "Mother, are you recruiting?" "I'm offering perspective," Soyeon said serenely. "There's a difference." She moved toward the door, paused beside Jihoon. "She's clever, this one. And she sees clearly. Don't waste that by treating her like a prisoner. Treat her like the asset she could become." Then she was gone, leaving Cynthia alone with Jihoon and the weight of implications she didn't want to examine. "What did she mean by asset?" Cynthia asked. "My mother believes you could be valuable to our organization beyond just being leverage against your father. She thinks you have skills we could use. I'm an English teacher. Not exactly criminal mastermind material. You have a degree in international law from University of Lagos. You speak 4 languages fluently. You understand systems and how to navigate them. And you're an outsider with no connections to any of the families we do business with. That combination is rare." That afternoon, Jihoon took Cynthia to a meeting in Gangnam, a restaurant that looked expensive and normal until they were led to a private room in the back. 3 men were already seated, all Korean, all middle-aged and wearing suits that screamed power and money. They looked at Cynthia like she was a curiosity, something unexpected that didn't quite fit the pattern they understood. "This is Cynthia Okafor," Jihoon said, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that looked protective but felt possessive. "She's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally." The declaration sent something hot and uncomfortable through Cynthia's chest. She'd spent 3 years in Seoul being invisible, being dismissed, being treated like she didn't quite belong. Now this dangerous man was claiming her in front of people who clearly mattered, marking her as his in a way that should have made her angry, but instead made her feel seen for the first time since she'd arrived in this country. The meeting proceeded in Korean, rapid-fire business discussion about territories and percentages and shipment schedules that Cynthia followed easily, but pretended not to. She sat quietly beside Jihoon, watching how he commanded the room without raising his voice, how the other men deferred to him despite being older and presumably more experienced. This was a man who'd inherited power young and had spent years proving he deserved to keep it. Later that night, after the meeting concluded and they were being driven back to the mansion in Jihoon's Mercedes, Cynthia finally spoke. "You didn't need me there today. That was a performance." "Partly," Jihoon admitted. "I wanted them to see you. To understand you're not just some foreigner I picked up. You're someone I value enough to bring into private meetings." "Why would you want them to think that?" "I told you. You're valuable. The more people who understand that, the safer you become. Because if someone tries to hurt you to get to me, they'll know they're starting a war they can't win." His logic was twisted but sound in a horrible way. By making her important to him publicly, he was painting a bigger target on her back, but also ensuring that target came with consequences too severe for most rivals to risk. It was protection through the promise of mutually assured destruction. "Do you actually care what happens to me?" Cynthia asked quietly. "Or am I just a useful piece in whatever game you're playing?" Jihoon was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at Seoul's neon-soaked streets. When he finally answered, his voice was different, lower, almost vulnerable. "I don't know yet. You frustrate me. You argue with everything I say. You refuse to be intimidated when any rational person would be terrified. You look at me like you're trying to understand instead of just accept. It's distracting, and I don't get distracted." That shouldn't have sounded like a confession. It definitely shouldn't have made Cynthia's pulse quicken, but it did. By the second week, Cynthia had stopped asking about leaving and started trying to understand the world she'd been dragged into. Miho became an unexpected ally, answering her questions about how the organization functioned with surprising honesty. "We provide services the government won't," he explained one morning during her combat training session. "Protection for neighborhoods police have abandoned. Loans for people banks won't touch. Employment for workers with records that make them unemployable elsewhere. Yes, we're criminals. But we're criminals who fill gaps legitimate society created." Cynthia blocked his punch, countered with one of her own that he easily deflected. "That sounds like rationalization. Maybe. Or maybe it's truth you're not ready to hear yet. The world isn't divided into good people and bad people. It's divided into people who acknowledge complexity and people who have the privilege of pretending morality is simple." She thought about that while showering after training, thought about her father back in Seoul who prosecuted organized crime with righteous certainty. He saw the world in black and white, good and evil, legal and illegal. But 3 years in Korea had taught Cynthia that reality was far more complicated. The legitimate businesses that underpaid foreign workers. The police who looked away when women like her reported harassment. The systems that crushed people who didn't fit neatly into expected categories. Maybe Jihoon's world was criminal, but was it really worse than the hypocrisy she'd been drowning in? That evening, Jihoon invited her to join him for dinner. Not a command this time. An actual invitation delivered with something that looked almost like nervousness. "I thought we could talk," he said. "About what?" "About whether you plan to hate me forever or if there's a possibility you might eventually see me as something other than your captor." Cynthia considered refusing, but curiosity won out over anger. She dressed carefully in one of the beautiful outfits that had appeared in her closet, a deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves and made her feel powerful instead of trapped. When she entered the dining room, Jihoon's expression did something complicated, his eyes tracking over her with appreciation so intense it felt like a physical touch. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Stop," Cynthia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You can't compliment me like we're on a date. This isn't a date. It's a negotiation." "Is it?" "Because right now, looking at you, the only thing I want to negotiate is whether you'll let me kiss you before or after dessert." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and magnetic. Cynthia should have been furious. Should have reminded him that she was here against her will, that his protection was just pretty language for captivity. Instead, she found herself moving closer, drawn by something she didn't want to name. "You don't get to want that," she whispered. "You don't get to keep me prisoner and then act like this is romance." "You're right." Jihoon's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I don't get to want you, but I do anyway. And I think you want me too, even though you hate that you do." He was right. Cynthia did want him, had been wanting him since she'd first opened her eyes and seen him sitting beside her bed looking at her like she was something precious instead of inconvenient. She wanted him despite the circumstances, despite the danger, despite knowing that wanting a man like Kang Jihoon was probably the stupidest thing she'd ever done. "I can't do this," she said, but she didn't pull away. "Yes, you can." His mouth was so close to hers now she could feel his breath. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, Cynthia. You can do anything." The kiss happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Soft at first, testing, giving her room to pull away. When she didn't, when she made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer instead, Jihoon's control shattered. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was air, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her against him with barely restrained desperation. Cynthia had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this kind of consuming intensity that made her forget where she was or why this was a terrible idea. All she knew was the heat of his mouth, the strength of his arms around her, the way he held her like she was something infinitely valuable that he'd go to war to protect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jihoon pressed his forehead against hers. "Tell me to stop," he said roughly. "Tell me this is wrong, and I'll walk away right now." Cynthia knew she should say exactly that. Should establish boundaries and remember that this man was dangerous, that his world was built on violence, that getting close to him was inviting disaster. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Don't stop." The words were permission and surrender all at once. Jihoon made a sound that was part groan, part relief, and kissed her again. Deeper this time, more certain. His hands mapped her body through the silk of her dress, learning curves and softness with reverent attention that made her feel worshipped instead of objectified. They moved together through the mansion in a haze of desire and breathless laughter, Jihoon showing her his private quarters, a suite of rooms she'd never seen before. Elegant but sparse, more windows showing Seoul spread below them like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time, giving her a final chance to retreat. "I'm terrified," Cynthia admitted, "but I'm sure." "Then let me show you exactly how much I've been wanting you." What happened next was heat and breath and the exquisite vulnerability of being seen completely. Jihoon undressed her slowly, kissing each new piece of revealed skin like he was memorizing her. When he finally laid her on his bed and covered her body with his own, Cynthia felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just desire. This was connection, recognition, two people finding something in each other they hadn't known they needed. Their joining was slow and intense, Jihoon whispering Korean endearments against her skin, praising her beauty, her courage, her strength. Cynthia lost herself in the sensation, in the impossible rightness of being held by someone who saw all of her and wanted her anyway. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Cynthia's head on Jihoon's chest listening to his heartbeat slow. She should have felt guilty or confused. Instead, she felt safe for the first time since waking up in his mansion. "This changes things," Jihoon said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I need you to understand what it means." "What does it mean?" "It means you're mine now. Not in the sense of ownership. In the sense that I will protect you with everything I have. Anyone who threatens you threatens me. Anyone who hurts you will answer for it in ways that will make them regret being born." The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through her chest. No one had ever claimed her like this, with such absolute certainty and protective fury. "What if I don't want to be yours?" she asked, testing him. "Then you'd be lying," Jihoon said, pulling her closer. "Because you gave yourself to me tonight, Cynthia, and I don't give back what's mine." The arrogance should have made her angry. Instead, she fell asleep smiling against his chest, feeling claimed and cherished in equal measure. The next morning, Cynthia woke alone in Jihoon's bed, panic flooding through her immediately. Had last night been a mistake? Would he regret it? Would he dismiss her now that he'd gotten what he wanted? She found her dress on the floor, pulled it on with shaking hands, and was trying to figure out how to slip back to her own room unnoticed when Jihoon appeared in the doorway. He was dressed for business already, three-piece suit perfectly tailored, looking every inch the dangerous crime lord he was. But his expression when he saw her was soft, almost tender. "You're awake," he said. "Good. I was about to send someone to make sure you hadn't run away in a panic." "I'm not running." The words came out more defensive than she'd intended. "Good. Because I have plans for you today, and they require your presence." "What kind of plans?" "The kind where I introduce you to my world properly, instead of keeping you locked away like a secret. Get dressed. We leave in an hour." He left before she could ask more questions. Cynthia returned to her own room to find Minji waiting with clothes already laid out. This time a stunning black dress that was professional but unmistakably expensive. "Where are we going?" Cynthia asked as Minji helped with her hair. "Mr. Kang has a meeting with the Park family. He wants you there." The Park family ran the Southern Territories, Cynthia had learned during her weeks of observation. Old money and older grudges, allied with the Kangs, but only barely. Taking her to meet them was a statement, a very public declaration that she mattered to Jihoon. The meeting took place at a restaurant in Gangnam, private room with river views and food that looked like art. The Parks were already seated when Jihoon and Cynthia arrived, 3 generations of power in expensive suits and traditional hanbok. They stared at Cynthia with barely concealed shock. "This is Cynthia Okafor," Jihoon said, his hand possessive on her lower back. "She saved my mother's life, and now she's under my personal protection." The matriarch of the Park family, an elegant woman in her 70s, studied Cynthia with sharp eyes. "You brought a foreigner to a family meeting. That's unprecedented." "She's family now," Jihoon said simply. "Anyone who questions that questions me." The room went very quiet. Cynthia understood she was watching a test of power, Jihoon using her as a way to establish dominance and force the Parks to either accept his authority or challenge it openly. After a long moment, the matriarch smiled. "Then welcome, Miss Okafor. Any woman brave enough to take a bullet for Soyeon is worth knowing." The tension eased fractionally. But Cynthia noticed how the younger Parks kept staring at her, particularly a man about Jihoon's age who looked at her with something that might have been interest or might have been calculation. His name was Park Min-jae, she learned during the meal. Heir to the Park Empire, handsome in a polished way that felt practiced. He sat across from her and asked questions that felt pointed. "So, you're a teacher. That must be quite different from this world." "Very different," Cynthia agreed carefully. "But I'm learning quickly." "I'm sure you are." Minji's smile didn't reach his eyes. Jihoon is an excellent teacher when he's motivated. The way Min-jae said it made Cynthia's skin prickle. This was a challenge disguised as politeness. Jihoon's hand found her thigh under the table, squeezing gently. A gesture of reassurance and possession all at once. The conversation continued, business mixed with social pleasantries. Cynthia mostly listened, observing dynamics and alliances. understanding that this world operated on respect and fear in equal measure. After the meal concluded, as they were saying goodbyes, Min-jae approached Cynthia while Jihoon was speaking with the park matriarch. "You should be careful," he said quietly. "Jihoon is possessive of things he values. But his world is dangerous. Women who get too close often end up hurt." "Is that a threat?" "An observation. You're beautiful and clearly intelligent. You could do better than becoming a crime lord's pet." Before Cynthia could respond, Jihoon was there, his expression pleasant, but his eyes absolutely lethal. "Min-jae," he said softly, "are you offering my woman unsolicited advice?" "Just friendly concern," Min-jae said, but he stepped back slightly. "She's new to our world. I thought she might appreciate guidance." "She has all the guidance she needs." Jihoon's voice dropped even lower. "And if I hear you've approached her again without my presence, I'll take it as a sign of disrespect that requires correction. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly." Min-jae smiled, but there was wariness in his eyes now. "My apologies. No offense intended. See that it stays that way." In the car afterward, Cynthia was quiet, processing what had just happened. Jihoon's hand found hers, threaded their fingers together. "He was testing boundaries," Jihoon said. "Seeing how protective I am of you. How far he could push before I responded. Did I pass his test?" "You exceeded it. By defending you that publicly, I just told every family in Seoul that you're untouchable. That threatening you means war." Cynthia should have been frightened by the implications. Instead, she felt something warm and powerful settle in her chest. For the first time in her life, she had someone willing to go to war for her. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal despite the circumstances. Cynthia continued her language lessons and combat training, spent afternoons in meetings where she observed and learned, spent evenings with Jihoon in ways that ranged from strategic discussions to quiet domesticity. He was teaching her his world, showing her the machinery underneath the violence, the legitimate businesses that employed hundreds, the protection services that kept neighborhoods safe when police wouldn't, the complex web of alliances and obligations that held Seoul's underworld together. It wasn't black and white the way her father had taught her to see it. It was shades of gray, people doing terrible things for complicated reasons, survival mixed with ambition, mixed with genuine attempts to build something lasting. 3 weeks after their first night together, Cynthia's phone rang with a number she recognized immediately. Her father. She stared at the screen, heart hammering. She hadn't spoken to him since the shooting, had sent only brief texts claiming she was fine and busy with work. Jihoon appeared in the doorway of her room like he'd sensed her panic. "Answer it," he said quietly. "If you don't, he'll worry and come looking." "What do I tell him?" "The truth, mostly. You were hurt. You're recovering. You're staying with people who are helping you. Just leave out the specifics of who those people are and what they do." Cynthia answered with shaking hands. "Dad, have you ever had to lie to someone you love to protect them? Have you ever hidden a truth so dangerous it could destroy your relationship forever?" Cynthia's father has no idea he's talking to his daughter while she's living with the very crime boss he's been hunting for years. Want to know what happens when he finally discovers the truth? Subscribe to Black and Soul TV because this secret won't stay hidden forever, and when it explodes, everything will change. Cynthia. Her father's voice was warm and concerned. "I've been worried. You've been so distant lately. Are you really okay?" "I'm fine, Dad. I promise. Just had an accident a few weeks ago. Nothing serious, but I've been recovering." "What kind of accident?" "I got caught in something I shouldn't have been near. But I'm okay now. I'm staying with people who are making sure I'm safe." "What people?" "Friends." "Dad, really, I'm fine. You tell me if you were in trouble?" Her father's voice was sharp now, the prosecutor in him emerging. "If someone was threatening you or hurting you, of course I would. But I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm learning things, seeing parts of Seoul I never knew existed. Just promise me you're being careful. This city isn't always safe for people like us." Cynthia's throat tightened. Her father meant foreigners, outsiders, people who didn't fit neatly into Korea's social hierarchies. He had no idea she was currently living with the exact kind of people he prosecuted, protected by a man whose organization he'd been trying to dismantle for years. After she hung up, Jihoon pulled her into his arms, held her while she tried not to cry. "That was harder than I expected," she admitted. "Lying to him feels wrong. You didn't lie. You just didn't tell him everything. There's a difference. He'll find out eventually. When he does, he'll never forgive me." Jihoon's arms tightened around her. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But for now, let yourself have this. Let yourself be happy without borrowing future pain. The next morning brought news that shattered any illusion of safety. Miho appeared during breakfast looking grim. We have a problem. The Jade Serpents hit one of our safe houses last night. 3 men dead. They're escalating. Jihoon's expression went cold and hard. Casualties on our side. 2 critical, 1 stable. The attackers left a message. They want Cynthia. The room went absolutely silent. Cynthia felt ice flood her veins as I turned toward her. What message? Jihoon asked, his voice deadly quiet. They said the woman who saved your mother is worth 10 of our territories. They want us to hand her over, or they'll start killing our people one by one until we do. Over my dead body. Jihoon stood, every line of his body radiating lethal intent. Double security on all our properties. Put our people on high alert. And send word to the serpents that if they so much as breathe in Cynthia's direction, I will personally burn their entire organization to ash. Boss, Miho said carefully, maybe we should consider negotiation. Maybe we could arrange a meeting, talk this through before it becomes open war. There's nothing to negotiate, Jihoon said flatly. They want what's mine. That's not negotiable under any circumstances. The next few days were tense. The mansion becoming a fortress with armed guards at every entrance, security feeds monitored constantly. Cynthia wasn't allowed to leave the building without a full detail, wasn't allowed near windows at certain times. The cage she'd been living in became even smaller, even more suffocating. I'm sorry, Jihoon said one night as they lay in his bed, Cynthia unable to sleep. This is my fault. I should have anticipated they'd target you. How could you anticipate someone trying to kidnap me because I saved your mother? That doesn't make sense as a strategy. It does if they've been watching us. If they've seen how I look at you, how protective I've become. They're not trying to hurt me through random violence. They're trying to hurt me by taking the one thing I actually care about. Cynthia turned to face him in the darkness. Do you care about me? Or am I still just a useful complication you're trying to manage? I'm in love with you. The words were quiet, but absolutely certain. I don't know when it happened. Maybe the first moment I saw you throwing yourself in front of a bullet without hesitation. Maybe later, when you argued with me instead of being afraid. But I'm in love with you, Cynthia Okafor, and the thought of anything happening to you makes me want to destroy the entire world. Tears stung her eyes. You can't love me. This whole situation is impossible. My father prosecutes people like you. I don't belong in your world. I don't care about possible or impossible. I care about you. And I'm done pretending this is just protection or just attraction. You're mine, and I'm yours, and everything else is just details we'll figure out together. The attack came 3 days later, swift and brutal, and exactly when they were least prepared. Cynthia was in the garden with Minji, enjoying rare sunlight after days of being trapped inside, when the first explosion shook the mansion's eastern wall. Gunfire erupted immediately, the sharp crack of automatic weapons that made Cynthia's blood freeze. Minji grabbed her arm, started pulling her toward the house, but they didn't make it 5 steps before men in black tactical gear poured through the breach in the wall. Get her inside, someone shouted in Korean. Don't let them take her. Cynthia found herself being shoved behind a concrete planter as Jihoon's security forces engaged the attackers. She could hear Miho's voice barking orders, hear the terrible sounds of violence happening just meters away. Then hands grabbed her from behind, yanking her backward. She screamed, fought, remembered everything Miho had taught her about self-defense. She drove her elbow into someone's ribs, heard a satisfying grunt of pain, twisted away only to be grabbed again by someone stronger. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. Chemical sweet smell that made her head spin. The world tilted sideways. The last thing she heard was Jihoon's voice roaring her name, full of rage and terror. Then nothing. Cynthia woke in darkness, head pounding, hands zip-tied behind her back. She was in some kind of warehouse. She could tell from the echoing quality of sounds around her. Footsteps approached and lights flicked on, making her squint against the sudden brightness. The man who appeared was older, 50s maybe, with the kind of face that spoke of decades spent doing terrible things. You're awake, he said in accented English. Good. We have much to discuss before Kang Jihoon arrives. Who are you? The leader of the Jade Serpents. You can call me Beck. And you, Miss Okafor, are going to help me send a message to your lover. I'm not helping you with anything. Beck smiled, and it was the coldest thing Cynthia had ever seen. You will. Because the alternative is pain you cannot imagine. We won't kill you, not yet. But we'll hurt you enough that when Jihoon finds you, assuming he finds you, you'll be broken in ways that never fully heal. Fear flooded through her, but Cynthia forced herself to meet his eyes. He'll come for me. And when he does, you'll regret every second of this. I'm counting on him coming. That's the entire point. Beck pulled out his phone, started recording. This is for Kang Jihoon. You have 24 hours to deliver control of your southern territories to us. If you refuse, we start removing pieces of your woman. Fingers first, then toes, then we get creative. The clock starts now. He stopped recording, sent the message. Then he turned back to Cynthia with that terrible smile. Now we wait and see how much you're really worth to him. At the mansion, Jihoon watched the video 3 times, his expression going more lethal with each viewing. Miho stood beside him, waiting for orders, knowing better than to speak first. Find them, Jihoon said finally, his voice soft and absolutely deadly. I want every resource we have dedicated to locating that warehouse. Call in favors from every ally we have. Offer rewards for information. I don't care what it costs. Boss, we need to think strategically here. If we rush in without planning, we could get her killed. If we wait, they'll hurt her. Jihoon turned to face his security chief. I'm going to tell you this once, Miho. I will burn this entire city to ash before I let them keep her. I will start a war that destroys every organization in Seoul if that's what it takes. Find her. Now. The next 12 hours were chaos. Jihoon's people swept through Seoul's underground, questioning contacts, tracking leads, putting pressure on every source they had. Word spread quickly that the Kang family was mobilizing, that Jihoon had declared personal war on the Jade Serpents. Smart criminals went to ground. Stupid ones tried to capitalize on the chaos. Jihoon dealt with the stupid ones personally, extracting information with efficiency that bordered on artistry. He was a man possessed, driven by fear and fury in equal measure. Soyeon appeared at the command center around midnight, watching her son coordinate the search with ruthless precision. You love her, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. More than I thought possible, Jihoon admitted. If they've hurt her, if they've damaged her in any way, I will make them beg for death. Good. That's exactly the kind of commitment this family needs. Now go get your woman back. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. One of the Serpent's lower-level soldiers, caught and persuaded through creative interrogation, gave up the warehouse location in Incheon. Jihoon mobilized immediately, assembling a strike team of his best fighters. Miho tried to convince him to stay back, let the professionals handle the extraction, but Jihoon shut him down with a look. She's mine, he said flatly. I'm getting her back personally. The warehouse was exactly where the information suggested, isolated industrial area near the port. Jihoon's team moved in with military precision, neutralizing guards, cutting through security. The gunfight that erupted was brief and brutal. Jihoon moved through it like a force of nature, focused entirely on finding Cynthia. He found her in a back room, still zip-tied but conscious and defiant. She had a split lip and bruising on her face, but she was alive and whole, and when she saw him, relief flooded her expression. Jihoon, she breathed. You came. Did you think I wouldn't? He cut her restraints, pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she gasped. I will always come for you. Always. Can we leave? Please, I just want to leave. Soon. First, I need to handle something. He turned to Miho, who'd just entered. Where's Beck? Secured in the next room. Boss, maybe we should just eliminate him quickly and get out of here. I'm not eliminating him quickly. Jihoon's voice was pure ice. I'm making an example. What happened next, Cynthia would remember in fragments. Jihoon leaving her with Miho while he went into the next room. Sounds of violence, controlled and methodical. When Jihoon emerged 15 minutes later, his suit was splattered with blood, but his expression was satisfied. It's done, he said simply. No one will threaten you again. The ride back to Seoul was quiet. Cynthia sat pressed against Jihoon's side, his arm around her shoulders, trying to process everything that had happened. She'd been kidnapped, threatened with torture, rescued by a man who'd then casually committed murder to protect her. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt safe. Back at the mansion, Soyeon was waiting. She embraced Cynthia carefully, mindful of her injuries. I'm glad you're safe, child. My son was prepared to start a war for you. He did start a war, Cynthia said quietly. He killed their leader. He ended a war, Soyeon corrected. There's a difference. By eliminating Baek so decisively, so publicly, Jihoon sent a message that will prevent future challenges. Sometimes violence is the only language our world understands. Over the next few days, Cynthia healed physically but struggled emotionally. She'd seen the depths of Jihoon's capacity for violence, understood exactly what kind of man she'd fallen in love with. He was a killer, efficient and remorseless when protecting what was his. That should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she'd ever felt in her life. A week after the rescue, Cynthia finally called her father. She couldn't keep avoiding him, couldn't keep lying about where she was and what she was doing. The conversation she needed to have would destroy their relationship, but dishonesty felt worse than the truth. "Dad," she said when he answered, "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Are you in trouble? I'm in love. With someone you definitely won't approve of." "Cynthia, what are you talking about? His name is Kang Jihoon. And before you say anything, I know who he is. I know what he does. I know you've been trying to build a case against his organization for years." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, her father spoke, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Tell me you're joking." "I can't. Because I'm not. He's kept me safe, Dad. When I was in danger, he moved heaven and earth to protect me. And I love him. He's a criminal, Cynthia. A murderer. He runs an empire built on violence and exploitation. How can you possibly justify being with someone like that?" "I'm not justifying anything. I'm just telling you my reality." Her voice shook, but she pushed forward. "You taught me to stand up for what's right. Well, Jihoon's world isn't black and white the way you see it. Yes, he does terrible things. But he also protects thousands of people that legitimate society abandoned. He provides for communities the government forgot. Maybe that doesn't excuse the violence, but it complicates the morality." Her father's response was immediate and cutting. "If you continue this relationship, I will have no choice but to treat you as compromised. As someone who's been turned by the enemy. You understand what that means?" "It means I'm disowning you," Cynthia said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "Because I chose to love someone you can't accept. I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm not walking away from him." The line went dead. Cynthia sat staring at her phone, feeling like her heart had been ripped out. Jihoon found her an hour later, still sitting in the same spot, face wet with tears. He gathered her into his arms without asking questions, just held her while she cried for the relationship she'd just destroyed. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know what your father means to you. I should have let you go weeks ago, before this got complicated." "Don't," Cynthia said fiercely. "Don't you dare suggest I should leave. I chose you, Jihoon. I chose this. And I'd make the same choice again, even knowing what it would cost." "Are you sure? Because once we cross certain lines, there's no going back." "I'm sure." She pulled back to look at him. "I love you. I love your darkness and your violence and your absolute certainty that you can protect the people you care about. I love that you went to war for me without hesitation. I love that you make me feel seen and valued and safe. So yes, I'm sure." The following month, Jihoon made his intentions clear by announcing their engagement publicly. Not to his organization this time, but to Seoul society at large. A formal party at a 5-star hotel, invitations sent to families that mattered, both legitimate and underground. Cynthia wore a dress that cost more than her former yearly salary, emerald silk that made her feel like royalty. And when Jihoon introduced her as his future wife, when he claimed her in front of everyone who mattered, she felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She wasn't Cynthia Okafor, English teacher anymore. She was Cynthia Okafor, future wife of Kang Jihoon, protected and cherished by one of Seoul's most dangerous men. The wedding happened 3 months later, a spectacular affair that blended Korean tradition with Nigerian culture. Cynthia wore both a hanbok and traditional Nigerian attire, the ceremony conducted in both Korean and English. Her father didn't attend, and the empty seat where he should have been was a wound that wouldn't fully heal. But Soyeon stood in as family, and Jihoon's organization surrounded them with loyalty and protection that felt like its own kind of love. As they exchanged vows, as Jihoon slipped a ring onto her finger and promised to protect her until his last breath, Cynthia felt the impossible rightness of the choice she'd made. Their first year of marriage was an education in power and partnership. Jihoon brought Cynthia fully into his operations, teaching her the intricacies of running a criminal empire. She discovered she had a talent for strategy, for seeing patterns others missed, for negotiating solutions that avoided violence. She became invaluable, not just as Jihoon's wife, but as his partner in truth. The organization thrived under their combined leadership, but the happiness was complicated by the continued estrangement from her father. Cynthia sent letters he never answered, left voicemails he never returned. The silence was its own kind of grief. Then, 8 months into their marriage, everything changed. Cynthia was at home when Miho called, his voice tight with urgency. "We have a situation. There's been an attack on a courthouse downtown. Multiple casualties. Your father was there." Cynthia's blood turned to ice. "Is he okay?" "He's alive but injured. The attackers were targeting him specifically. Some rival group trying to eliminate him before he could prosecute their case. Jihoon is already en route to the hospital." Cynthia met Jihoon at the emergency room, fear overriding months of anger and hurt. Her father was in surgery, the doctors said. Multiple gunshot wounds. Touch and go. She sat in the waiting room with Jihoon beside her, his hand gripping hers. "Why would he help?" Cynthia asked quietly. "My father hates you. He hates everything you represent." "Because you love him," Jihoon said simply. "And I love you. That makes your father's safety important to me regardless of how he feels about our marriage." Hours later, when her father finally came out of surgery stable but critical, Cynthia was allowed to see him briefly. He looked small in the hospital bed, diminished by injury and trauma. When he saw her, tears filled his eyes. "Cynthia," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." "For what, Dad?" "For cutting you off. For being too proud to see that you'd found something real. Your husband, he organized the security that kept the attackers from finishing the job. His people were the ones who got me to the hospital alive." "I know," Cynthia said, her own tears falling. "He did it because he loves me. And because he understands family, even when that family doesn't accept him." Her father's hand found hers weakly. "I was wrong about him. Maybe not about everything he does, but about his capacity to love you properly. Any man who'd protect his enemy to make his wife happy, that's a man worth keeping." The reconciliation was slow and imperfect. Her father didn't suddenly approve of Jihoon's organization or criminal activities, but he accepted the reality of their marriage, accepted that his daughter had found love in an unlikely place. He attended family dinners at the mansion, had careful conversations with Jihoon about boundaries and expectations. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. A bridge built across impossible distance. 2 years into their marriage, Cynthia discovered she was pregnant. The news sent Jihoon into a tailspin of protective fury and overwhelming joy. He tripled security, hired the best doctors in Seoul, treated Cynthia like she was made of glass. "She's going to be a girl," Soyeon predicted, watching Jihoon fuss over Cynthia's vitamin regimen. "And she's going to have her mother's courage and her father's absolute certainty." That's a terrifying combination. The pregnancy was smooth despite Jihoon's constant anxiety. And when their daughter was born on a rainy October evening, perfect and healthy and screaming with impressive fury, Cynthia watched her dangerous husband hold their child with such tender reverence that her heart felt too big for her chest. "What should we call her?" Jihoon asked, staring at their daughter like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe was real. "Soyeon," Cynthia said, "after your mother. So she carries the legacy of the woman who started all of this." Jihoon's eyes went bright with unshed tears. He kissed Cynthia softly, then pressed a kiss to their daughter's forehead. "I love you," he said. "Both of you. More than I have words to express." "I know," Cynthia whispered back. "I know because you show me every single day. Because you'd burn the world down to keep us safe. And that's exactly the kind of love I want our daughter to grow up understanding. That real love is fierce and protective and willing to fight for what matters." Months passed in the beautiful chaos of new parenthood. Jihoon was obsessed with their daughter, constantly holding her, talking to her in Korean and English, introducing her to his organization like she was royalty they all needed to protect. Cynthia watched her ruthless crime lord husband become soft and silly, watched him sing lullabies at 3 in the morning and have serious conversations with a baby who couldn't possibly understand. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one hidden beneath layers of violence and strategy. The one who was capable of devastating tenderness when he allowed himself to be vulnerable. Her father visited regularly now, bringing gifts for his granddaughter, having careful conversations with Jihoon about legacy and future. I want better for her, he said one afternoon, holding baby Soyeon with practiced ease. I want her to have choices you and Cynthia didn't have. She'll have every choice, Jihoon promised. Every opportunity. And the protection to pursue whatever life she wants. Even if that means walking away from all of this. That's all any of us can ask for. Her father looked at Cynthia, then at Jihoon. You've built something here. Not just an organization, but a family. I may not agree with all your methods, but I respect what you've created. Thank you, Jihoon said quietly. That means more than you know. One evening, 3 years after Cynthia had first woken up in Jihoon's mansion, she stood in their bedroom watching Seoul's lights spread below. Jihoon came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. How none of this should have worked. Cynthia leaned back against him. How by every logical measure, we should have destroyed each other. But here we are. Married. Parents. Happy despite the impossibility of it all. Some things aren't meant to make sense, Jihoon said. They're just meant to be felt. And what I feel for you, it defies logic and reason and every smart strategic choice I should have made. But it's real. It's the most real thing in my life. I love you, Cynthia whispered. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Good. Jihoon turned her to face him. Because I'm terrified too. Terrified of losing you, of failing to protect you and our daughter, of not being worthy of what you've given me. But I wake up every day determined to deserve you. To be the man you see when you look at me instead of the monster everyone else sees. You're both, Cynthia said, cupping his face. And I love both. The monster who protects me and the man who holds our daughter like she's made of light. You're exactly who you need to be. And I wouldn't change a single thing. They kissed as Seoul glittered below them, as their daughter slept peacefully in the next room, as the impossible love they'd built continued to grow stronger despite every reason it shouldn't exist. Years later, when people asked Cynthia how she'd ended up married to one of Seoul's most dangerous men, she never knew quite how to explain. How do you tell someone that love doesn't follow logical patterns? That sometimes the person who saves you is the same person everyone else fears? How do you explain that danger and devotion can exist in the same heart? That violence can be protective instead of destructive when wielded by someone who values you above everything? She'd started her life in Seoul invisible and struggling, one emergency away from disaster. She'd taken a bullet for a stranger and woken up in a world that should have destroyed her. Instead, she'd found love in the darkness, had built a family with a man who'd burned the world to keep her safe, had learned that morality was far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. Her father had eventually accepted what she'd known from the beginning. That Kang Jihoon, for all his darkness and violence, loved her with a purity that transcended the criminal empire he controlled. That their marriage, however unlikely, was built on genuine devotion and mutual respect. That sometimes the best love stories are the ones that make no sense, that defy every expectation, that survive despite impossible odds. And on quiet evenings when Jihoon held their daughter and looked at Cynthia like she was the answer to questions he'd never known to ask, she understood that she'd made exactly the right choice. That walking into danger that night in the alley had led her to the one person in the world who saw all of her, darkness and light, strength and vulnerability, and loved her not despite those contradictions, but because of them. This was her life now. Beautiful and dangerous and absolutely hers. And she wouldn't trade it for anything.